I have said it before and I will say it again. Alberta is not just another province right now. It is the front line of a rebellion. You can call it Wexit. You can call it sovereignty. You can even call it independence. But at its core, it is something much simpler. It is Albertans standing up and saying enough is enough. And honestly, can you blame them? The Alberta Prosperity Project has already put forward the referendum question. The very question Ottawa has always feared, and now here it is staring the country right in the face. And here's what makes this even bigger. Alberta is not alone. Saskatchewan is watching closely. Manitoba is right there in the wings. Even rural British Columbia is getting ready to step in line. What shocks people is how fast this shifted from theory to reality. Not long ago, organizers needed 6,400 signatures just to get this on the ballot. Ottawa probably laughed, thinking Albertans could never pull those numbers. But Danielle Smith's government lowered the threshold to just 177 on the exert. And guess what? Organizers are already boasting about more than 240 social pledges locked in. This is no longer a question of if, it is a question of when. The ballot is practically guaranteed. And Ottawa still pretends it holds all the cards. The truth is, it does not. Alberta has just taken the first official step to break from Canada, and the shockwaves are already rattling through Ottawa. This did not come out of nowhere. It comes from years of betrayal. Ottawa killed project after project while branding Alberta as Canada's dirty oil province. Keystone XL, gone, with Alberta losing $3 billion. Energy East, cancelled before it even had a chance. Northern Gateway, vetoed like Alberta's economic future was disposable. Add it all up and you are looking at more than $500 billion in lost projects. $500 billion. And yet Alberta is still expected to smile, pay its taxes, and applaud a federal government that strangles its economy. That is not partnership. That is abuse. This push for Alberta to leave has roots going back decades. But every year, Ottawa makes it worse. And let us not forget the insult of equalization. Over the past decade, Alberta has hemorrhaged $250 billion in net transfers to Ottawa. That is $250 billion sucked out of families, workers, and businesses in Alberta and dumped into other provinces. Provinces that then turn around and sneer at Alberta's energy. This is not pocket change. This is money that should have built schools, hospitals, and highways in Alberta. Instead, it disappears eastward while Ottawa lectures about transitioning to some fantasy of a green utopia. And if you ever wondered why Albertans are furious enough to take the nuclear option of separation, there is your answer. And here's something most people miss from the very beginning. Alberta has known that if it wanted real leverage, it would have to look south. There's already open discussion about the United States offering Alberta options, becoming its own sovereign constitutional republic with ties to the Commonwealth, or even joining the US outright as the 51st state. The very fact that this is on the table shows how badly Ottawa has failed to hold the country together, and Ottawa's punishment economy does not stop with vetoed pipelines. Alberta produces 2 million barrels of oil every single day. That is over 2 billion barrels per year, more than many OPEC nations. Whole countries build their national identity on oil exports. And yet in Canada, Alberta's energy is treated like a dirty secret, something Ottawa wants to bury instead of celebrate. Think about how insane that is. Any other nation would be bragging to the world about being an energy superpower. But here, Ottawa acts like Alberta's production is a shameful burden to be managed rather than the backbone of the country. The costs of this arrogance are staggering. Cancelled pipelines alone have drained $55 billion in GDP losses every single year. That translates into $17 billion annually in lost provincial revenue for Alberta alone. Do you know what $17 billion could do? It could build hospitals so families do not have to wait 12 hours in emergency rooms. It could rebuild rural schools. It could fund highways and infrastructure. It could create thousands of jobs. Instead, that money is gone, vaporized by federal policies like Bill C-69, the so-called No More Pipelines Act. In the emissions cap designed to suffocate Alberta's economy, Ottawa is literally choking the lifeblood out of Alberta while pretending it is saving the planet. And here's the reality. The people of Alberta now have a one-time opportunity to decide whether they want to be sovereign, free from Ottawa's control. This time, they are not going to miss it. This time, they know it will decide the future of the province. And let's be clear, Alberta is not some small, irrelevant province throwing a tantrum. Its GDP stands at $340 billion, about 14% of the entire Canadian economy, with only 11% of the population. In other words, Alberta punches way above its weight. Energy alone contributes $70 billion annually to Canada's GDP. Without Alberta, the Canadian economy would collapse Yet Ottawa still treats it like a piggy bank to raid instead of a partner to respect. This is punishment economics, a system that drains Alberta's wealth to prop up weaker provinces, while sneering at the very industry that makes the country function. And let's be brutally honest, Canada is now in political, economic, and social freefall. Alberta is no longer standing alone. Saskatchewan has stepped up right beside it. This is not just talk. They're moving in lockstep. The Lloydminster Joint Caucus between Alberta and Saskatchewan was not some symbolic meeting. It was a declaration. A roadmap for independence was laid out with a timetable, a legal framework, and a plan to put the sovereignty question directly to the people. That is not politics as usual. That is history being written in real time. Saskatchewan is not bluffing. The threshold for a referendum there is only 125,000 signatures. Grassroots organizers are already on the ground collecting them. And polling shows that more than 40% of the people in Saskatchewan are ready to vote, leave, and Premier Scott Moe himself has pledged not to block a referendum. Read between the lines, that is the green light. Saskatchewan is saying that if the people want to vote, they will get that vote. Period. And why should they not? Saskatchewan is just as alienated as Alberta. Its economy is driven by oil, producing nearly 500,000 barrels a day. Add in potash, uranium, and wheat, and you are looking at industries tied heavily to US buyers. Yet Ottawa piles on new rules, taxes, and restrictions that crush competitiveness. It is the same story over and over again. Wealth generated in the West, punished and redistributed by the East. How long can you tell a province to shut up and pay before it decides to walk away? Saskatchewan has reached that point. The mindset is different out here. Life is about independence, freedom, and resilience. The East does not misunderstand that. It simply does not care. And this is where it gets really interesting. Interior British Columbia. For years, BC was seen as an outlier. Vancouver dominated the political narrative, shaping the image of the entire province. But that was only half the story. Out in interior BC, in towns that depend on forestry, mining, oil, and gas, people are waking up to the same reality Alberta and Saskatchewan have faced for decades. Their industries are strangled by federal red tape, court delays, and environmental vetoes written by people thousands of kilometers away who have never set foot in a sawmill or oil field. This is not just about one province leaving Confederation. This is the West breaking off as a bloc, and Ottawa knows that once the dam breaks, there is no patching it together again. I have seen the anger boiling in these small towns. Projects stall, jobs vanish, and young people pack up and leave. It is the same hollowing out of rural communities we have seen for years. But this time, it is not just economics. It is survival. Families are watching their livelihoods collapse, while Ottawa pats itself on the back for another so-called green victory. Do you think these families care about Ottawa's slogans? No. They care about paychecks. They care about whether there is food on the table at the end of the week. And when that is taken away, you do not just create resentment. You create generational fury. Interior BC's frustration is not abstract. It is not flag-waving or empty slogans. It is about survival. That is why halls are filling up with separation meetings. That is why people who have never cared about politics are suddenly asking whether their future even lies with Ottawa anymore. When jobs vanish, when families are forced to move away, when a town feels like it has no future, the idea of separation does not sound radical anymore. It sounds like common sense. It sounds necessary. And let me spell out the truth. The West is not seen as a partner. It is seen as a piggy bank. The West supplies the resources, pays the bills, and then gets punished. That is how Ottawa operates. And that is why this rebellion has momentum. Alberta is leading. Saskatchewan has joined shoulder to shoulder. Interior BC is waking up. This is not scattered anger anymore. This is a movement with real teeth. Momentum. Ottawa cannot stop with scare tactics or empty speeches. For years, Ottawa dismissed Wexit as a fringe fantasy. But fringe movements do not collect 240,000 signatures. Fringe does not fill halls in BC. Fringe does not unite two provincial governments in joint caucus meetings. This is no longer fringe. This is the West deciding that it has had enough. So when people ask me if this is real, if this is serious, my answer is simple. Look at the numbers. Look at the signatures. Look at the fury. Alberta has already crossed the line. Saskatchewan is right behind it. Interior BC is whispering, why not us? The West is not waiting for Ottawa's permission anymore. And why should it? Ottawa had decades to treat the West fairly. It chose punishment instead. Now the bills are coming due. People are realizing this is the moment. This is the chance to move forward, to have a better future, to finally break free. And that brings us to Manitoba, the province that is rarely talked about, but could become the quiet backbone of this entire movement. Manitoba does not make noise like Alberta. It does not pound the table like Saskatchewan. It does not fill halls with firebrand rallies like Interior BC. But silence should not be mistaken for loyalty. Manitoba is the logistical artery of the prairies. Rail lines, ports, and access to the US all run straight through it. If Alberta and Saskatchewan are the fuel, Manitoba is the pipeline that carries it to market. No Western corridor works without Manitoba. That makes its stance absolutely critical. And here is the kicker. Cracks are already appearing in Manitoba's quiet stance. Indigenous leaders and local voices have begun openly acknowledging Ottawa's failures. That matters because Manitoba has historically played the middle child role in Confederation. Keep your head down. Balance East and West. But even there, patience is wearing thin. If Manitoba even leans halfway towards independence, the balance of power shifts suddenly. The economic corridor stretching from Alberta's oil sands through Saskatchewan's potash fields is not just theory, it becomes reality. And Ottawa will not be able to stop it. Manitoba's silence is not loyalty, it is strategy. It is waiting. But the anger is starting to surface. Public acknowledgements of unfair treatment are slipping out. And once that dam breaks, you do not put it back together, Manitoba might not be the first to scream independence. But when it moves, it will shake Ottawa to the core. But let's zoom out for a second, because what we are dealing with here is not just about money, pipelines, or referendum signatures. This is about culture. This is about values. And this is where Canada has already split in two. On one side, you have the West. Faith, family, freedom, self-reliance. The grit that comes from pulling oil out of the ground in -20 winters, from harvesting wheat, from cutting lumber. On the other side, you have Ottawa's Canada. Bureaucracy, entitlements. Progressive dictates, government telling you what to drive, how to heat your home, what you're allowed to build, and how guilty you should feel about the very industries that feed your family. Ottawa has done damage not just economically, but culturally. Premier Danielle Smith made it plain. If Ottawa had not blocked those pipelines, Alberta would have added another $55 billion every year to GDP and $17 billion in provincial revenue. That is not speculation. That is a lost future. Albertans will tell you this is no longer about policy. It is about culture. It is about Ottawa trying to reshape their values while draining their wealth. In Interior BC, in prairie towns, people already say they live in a different country. Their survival depends on industries Ottawa despises. Ottawa politicians can lecture all day about green transitions. But when you're standing in a shuttered sawmill town, or your cousin just lost his oil field job, those speeches are not just empty. They are an insult. Once the divide becomes cultural, not just political, compromise becomes impossible. You can debate tax rates. You can negotiate policies, but you cannot negotiate values. You cannot tell provinces built on faith and resilience that their way of life is dirty, outdated, shameful, and then expect them to keep paying the bills for the very government that mocks them. That is not how nations hold together. That is how they break apart. And this cultural divide is fueling the inevitability of separation. Canadians themselves see it. Polls show majorities in every region believe the country is more divided than ever. The question is not whether division exists. The question is whether it can be stopped. And the blunt truth is no, it cannot. The West is not just angry anymore. It is organized. The referendum machinery is legally viable under the Clarity Act. A clear question, a clear majority, and Ottawa is legally bound to negotiate. That is constitutional fact, not speculation. And Ottawa still does not get it. Every rejection, every carbon tax, every veto, it does not stop the movement, it accelerates it. When Ottawa blocks a pipeline, the West does not retreat, it digs in deeper. When Ottawa raises another tax, it does not scare people. It convinces them they were right all along. What used to be fear has turned into fuel. Momentum is building, and Ottawa has no one to blame but itself. This leaves Canada at the breaking point. If Alberta and Saskatchewan leave, 1/3 of Canada's oil production is gone overnight. Tens of billions in GDP evaporate. Equalization collapses. The subsidies that prop up eastern provinces disappear. Do you think Ontario is going to fill that gap? Good luck. Equalization only goes in one direction, and Ottawa's regulatory grip makes sure Alberta never sees the return on its own wealth. And this is no longer about just Alberta and Saskatchewan. Add Manitoba's logistical backbone, add Interior BC's resources. What you have is a Western bloc that is economically viable and geographically unstoppable. Rail, ports, pipelines, oil, gas or wheat, uranium, forestry, the West holds all of it. If that bloc stands on its own, Ottawa can scream and threaten all it wants. The math does not work without the West. Confederation cannot survive when its most productive provinces are treated like colonies. forced to bankroll their own punishment. For decades, the West sent its wealth east, hoping for respect in return. Instead, it got lectures, it got taxes, it got vetoes. Now the patience is gone. The message from the West could not be clearer. Time is up. Negotiations are over. So when I hear people dismissing this, saying Alberta is bluffing, Saskatchewan will never really leave, Manitoba is too quiet, Interior BC does not matter, I laugh. Because I have seen the signatures, I have heard the fury in those halls. I have seen the polls climb higher every time Ottawa spits in the West's face. This is not bluff. This is the inevitable outcome of decades of mistreatment. And let me tell you something personal. I used to think maybe there was still time. Maybe Ottawa could wake up, reverse course, and treat the West as an equal partner. But after everything I have seen, I don't believe that anymore. That time is gone. The West knows it. Alberta is leading. Saskatchewan is ready. Interior BC is restless. Manitoba is stirring. The momentum is real. And once it breaks, Canada as we know it is history. That is not a threat. That is reality. Confederation is cracking wide open. And Ottawa, you have nobody to blame but yourself. The West wanted respect. Instead, it got punishment. And now it is ready to walk.